Let's get down to it.
That's right.
The meltdown is a term of art. Nation magazine, so incapable of doing the corporate side, didn't bring any copies of the book except for one, but I will show you. We just saw a book that we put out on the economic crisis called The Meltdown, using that as a phrase to begin the dialogue here. Meltdown is a crisis, there's no doubt about that. But we must be careful not to treat the crisis alone.
That's right.
We must also treat the disease. A heart attack is a crisis. But if you only treat the attack, not the underlying heart disease, you virtually assure another heart attack and death.
That's right.
If you will allow me to play out the medical metaphor for just a moment, I will suggest that we have assembled today a remarkable team of financial physicians, experts on diagnosis, treatment, and care of a capitalist economy in crisis. And it would be appropriate, I think, for me to begin with Dr. Pollin. Doctor, what went wrong? Why is this economy so sick?
Do I do it from here? Or?
Yeah, you're right there.
Okay. Thank
I'll
you.
give you the microphone, they'll never let you go.
That's true. Okay, well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here. You're right, it's a very distinguished panel, and I'm really honored to be part of it. What went wrong? I'm going to give a really quick history lesson, not too long, very, very short. Okay, so I'm going to start in the 1970s. And there are two long-term trajectories that have been leading us to where we are today that have converged into this convergent disaster of an employment crisis, mass unemployment, and a total financial meltdown. And these two things have been building for over a generation. And the reason they were building is because somewhere around the 1970s, basically our political system turned themselves over entirely to capitalists. They let capitalists run the show pretty much as they wanted to run the show, and I'm going to give you two important cases of this. The first is what happened to the idea that was central, that was the central moral principle that came out of the 1930s depression and the transformation of economic policy that came out of the depression, was that full employment was the idea around which you organize economic policy. That was a political idea, it was an economic idea, and fundamentally it was a moral idea. Now, of course, it was not practiced in a way that was satisfactory from, say, the post-World War II period up through the mid-1970s, but it nevertheless formed a central premise around which economic policy was organized. That was abandoned. So what we observe, starting in the mid-70s and continuing to the present, is a long-term decline in conditions for workers in this country. And we can tell a lot of stories about that. I'm going to give you one quick snapshot. In 1972, when Richard Nixon was in his second year of office, no, that's not true. It was before, yeah, second term, yeah. Okay, the average wage for a non-supervisory worker in this country, the average wage expressed in today's dollars, was $19.40 an hour. That was the average non-supervisory worker. In 2007, and I'm saying this because it's before the meltdown, the year before the meltdown, the average wage was $17.40. That is a decline in the average wage for a U.S. non-supervisory worker of about 11%. So over the course of 35 years, the average condition for workers has been declining. It isn't just something that happened this last year and a half. Okay, now that's only half the story. At the same time that the average wage was going down, over ups and downs of the business cycles, Democrat, Republican Republican presidential administrations. It was a long trajectory. Average productivity, the average amount that a worker produces when he or she comes to work every day, and it is the workers that are doing the producing.
That's right.
That's right. Average productivity rose 90%. I'm not making this up. This is right out of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Average productivity goes up 90%, and what is the reward to workers? You get an 11% pay cut. That has been the basic premise that has guided economic policy regarding the U.S. working class for 35 years. It did not start last year. Okay, the second history lesson, and I'll be very brief. At the same time that this was going on with respect to living standards for workers, we have the idea somehow that is captured by both Democrats and Republicans that Wall Street gets to do whatever it wants. We had a financial regulatory system coming out of the Depression. It was called Glass-Steagall. It had problems, but it was actually, on average, it was worked pretty well. We had a stable financial system. Credit was channeled to productive activities. In the 70s, we began to dismantle that system. We have crisis after crisis. This is not anything new, this crisis. Did you all forget about the savings and loans crisis in the 80s? What about the Wall Street crash in 1987? What about the global crisis that started with developing countries in the mid-90s? Then we had the dot-com crash on Wall Street in 2001. They're happening every 5 or 6 years, and this one just happens to be the most severe. Why did they happen? Because if you study the history of capitalism, whenever you have an unregulated financial system, you will have crises. No exceptions. And so this is where we have gotten, and it was both Democratic and presidential administrations that supported deregulation of finance. Most egregiously, the presidency of President Bill Clinton and his top economic advisors, Robert Rubin and Lawrence Summers. Lawrence Summers is now the top economic advisor, I'm sorry to say, for President Barack Obama. That's my lesson. That's how we got to the convergence that led to this crisis that we're at now.
Robert Pollin.